Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Women in BIM podcast today. One second. There we go. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Women in podcast this morning. It is on the realities of the application of BIM in the United Kingdom. Hopefully you can see my slides there. My name is Vicky Reynolds. I'm the Global Vice Chair for Women in BIM based in London in the UK. We have a team globally, including our chair, Rebecca DeChico, in Australia, and a series of regional leads across the world. You can find all of the information on those on our website and some more information about who we are and what we do. But essentially, our core objectives are we aim to encourage and support women in digital construction, attract women into the industry and young girls into the industry, and promote the industry to women and girls looking for career change or looking for a career whilst they're in school, and also to then advance and retain women who are in the industry, providing role models, providing support, networking opportunities and resources. We have a core team, as I mentioned previously. There's Rebecca DeChico, our founder and global chair. She's based in Australia. There's myself, based in London, Vicky Reynolds, Dr. Jenny Barrett, who's also based in London and is our education lead, and Gegana Stekova, who looks after our database and does a lot of our data-centric tasks and responsibilities, and then Nicole DeChico, who is our fantastic global admin based in Australia. But if you've had any kind of engagement with Women in BIM, chances are that you've either met or spoken to Nicole. So basically, we strongly believe as a core team that as a group, we have greater influence to support, empower and celebrate women in BIM related roles, and to encourage young women to enter the construction industry. And we're supported in that vision by our wonderful sponsors across Europe and APAC. We've got Glider BIM, who are our gold sponsor in the UK. We've got i3PT, who are our silver sponsor, Oricon over in Australia as our gold sponsor, and also GHD and Mott MacDonald. Without our sponsors, we wouldn't be able to maintain the database, maintain the website, and do the projects that we deliver, including our mentor program, our education projects, and we're doing some new projects on the implementation of ISO 19650, which is, of course, the part of the theme for this webinar, and also into remuneration and pay grades for different BIM roles. So keep your eyes open and contact us if you'd like to be involved with any of those projects, or if you'd like to hear a little bit more. So today, as I mentioned at the beginning, we're going to be talking about the realities of the application of BIM in the United Kingdom. We have some fantastic speakers. We have May Winfield, the Head of Commercial and Legal for Cities and Digital at Bureau Happold. We have Chloe Obi, Head of BIM at Boyks in UK, and Rob Jackson, Associate Director at Bond Bryan Digital. I won't attempt to introduce the speakers. I'm sure that they will be able to do that themselves at the beginning of their presentations. And then after the presentations, we'll have a panel session where it will be open for you to ask questions and correspond with our panelists. So if you have any questions at any point, either during the presentation or during the panel, please add them to the chat function. So hopefully you can see that in your screen. There's a drop-down list with some options, and one of those options is to add a note to the chat. There's a to button, and if you click that, you can choose to send a message either just to myself and the speakers or to the entire audience. So please feel free to correspond with us there. And without further ado, I will pass us on to our first speaker, which will be May Winfield today. So bear with me one second. Let me just pass ownership on to May. And May, if you'd like to turn your camera on, perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, Vicky. Have you given me control so I can share my screen? Okay.
I have yet, sorry.
Okay, it's just come up. Thank you. Now, Vicky, I'm going to ask you, are you seeing the screen with the slides on?
We're seeing your GoToWebinar screen at the moment, Meg.
Let's try that again. Sorry, guys.
That's okay. At least we know you're definitely doing it live.
Let's try that again. So you should now be seeing the slide screen.
We are, yeah. Not in
Amazing.
presentation mode though. Ah, there we go, yeah.
Cool. All right. Now we've got the inevitable tech problems over. I'm just going to go through very quickly some of the legal and contractual matters I've seen more recently as regards BIM. So a bit about me, I'm May Winfield. If you're on Twitter, I tweet a lot about this area. I've been doing law for about 19 years. I've been specializing in BIM and construction technology for quite a long time. I've led the drafting of a number of different standard form documents, including the JCT 2019 BIM practice note, the more recent ISO 19650 information protocol, and the legal guidance you'll find on the BIM framework, UK BIM framework. I'm also chair of BIM for Legal. If you are interested in this area, do join us, join our mailing list. We try and organize various events to enable the industry to gain knowledge about this area, as well as your legal advisors, and my UK BIM Alliance ambassador. Just very quickly, for those of you who don't know, Borough Happold, if you haven't heard of us, you've probably heard of some of our projects, such as the Museum of the Future and various others. We are fully BIM enabled. We also do a lot of things within the technology and digital space, such as the BOM, which is an open source modeling platform trying to make things more software agnostic. And you can check that out on the link there. But on the topic we have at hand, now why am I bothering to talk about legal or contracts at all? Well, at the beginning of a project, everything's this great love affair. If anything happens, obviously you're going to just sit down, talk about it. But when issues do come up, it looks more like this, and everyone then goes back to the contract. What did we say? What was agreed? And if it is vague or there are any inconsistencies, you end up with a very expensive dispute. One of the big continuing issues is about terminology, and when I say that, I do include jargon and acronyms, because as we all know, BIM loves a good acronym. One of the latest ones I see a lot is specifications which say, I want BIM level 2 according to the ISO 19650 part 2, or it'll say BIM level 2 according to ISO 19650 part 2 and PAS 1192. What's wrong with this? Well, to put it simply, there is no level 2 under the ISO 19650, and this is explained more in the guidance. The idea of levels comes from PAS 1192, and you see the wedge there that comes from the PAS. The ISO has replaced it with stages, and the square there comes from the guidance. But so when you say BIM level 2 according to ISO 19650, it means even less than just saying level 2 by itself. To add to the complication, the ISO 19650 has introduced a particular overarching standard saying BIM according to ISO 19650. Now, from a legal and contractual point of view, that's clear as mud, and you do need to put in your contract what that means, because otherwise, if you just say, I want you to deliver BIM according to ISO 19650, do you mean every single word in the ISO? You probably don't want that, because ISO is drafted very widely. It's meant to apply to different sorts of projects. You don't really want it to be complied with in its entirety. The way we got around this in the information protocol is to say that BIM according to ISO 19650 means compliance with your contractual obligations. And that may sound circular, but at least it identifies what parties' expectations are. So you're not paying lawyers a lot of money, you're not spending a lot of time arguing what you actually meant. Another one is about contract documents. Now, in the industry, it's a continuing problem that the BIM documents may not make their way into the contract. The ones that you're using may not be the ones within the contractual documents, and that's something that's worth checking. Indeed, it's not uncommon to see the BIM documents that are being used bear little or no resemblance to the BIM documents actually in the contract. And that's sometimes because different people are compiling the contract compared to the people actually delivering the BIM, and people just need to talk to each other. And you may need to explain to the people compiling the contract, look, the BEP is a live document that needs to be reflected in the contract. Another common problem I see a lot is that the BIM documents are listed as standard. So a client may list the information protocol within the standards. They may list the ISO 19650 and the PAS 1192 to comply with. If you do list either the information protocol or the earlier CIC BIM protocol in the standard, it's not binding. It will have no legal force because it's meant to be a contractual document. So that's just something to bear in mind. And I think that's happening a lot in the industry due to just simple lack of understanding. The expected contractual documents ideally should be an EIR, a BET, MIDP, and some sort of BIM contract terms. As a lot of you will know, you don't probably get all four of these. You may get one of them. But if you don't, there is necessarily going to be a gap. If you don't have an EIR, you don't know what the client really wants. You could argue about that later on. You don't have a BET. It's not clear how it's going to be delivered. If you don't have contract terms, it's not going to be clear about copyright, about obligations. If something gets corrupted, how much are you supposed to look at and do a clash detection when you receive information and data? Now, on the topic of the BIM protocol, information protocol, one thing to bear in mind is ISO 19650 does anticipate and require an information protocol to be part of the contract. Now, this is a flowchart which I created with Paul Shilcock, who's the author of ISO 19650 Part 2, trying to explain the documentation that's envisaged from a contractual perspective by the ISO. And you'll see that right at the top is information protocol. And there is a template which was released at the end of 2019, early 2020, which you can find under UK BIM Framework website. There's been a lot of feedback on its use, which we've taken into account. But one of the big things is the terminology used in it. We use the ISO 19650 terms, so appointing party, lead appointed party, saying what their relevant obligations are. But we also use the terms appointer, so who's doing the appointing, who's paying the bills in this contract, and appointee, who's getting paid, who's doing the work. And that's because in the information protocol, we set out what each party's obligations are. So you're going to be an A or a B, and then you're going to be a C, D, or E. But again, there has been some misunderstanding as to how it's going to be used. The information protocol is an important document. If you are going to apply the ISO 19650, you should be using it or something similar. As I said earlier, it's not a standard, don't list it as one, but it is appointment agnostic, so you should be able to use it for standard forms, regardless which one, whether you're using a bespoke contract, two-party, alliancing, multi-party contracts. One thing also that's come up is where a client does choose to apply the PAS 1192 standards for whatever reason, and they're perfectly entitled to do so, they can use the CIC BIM protocol that's written with the PAS 1192 standards in mind. However, you shouldn't be using the CIC BIM protocol if you're applying the ISO 19650. It predates it and therefore some of the clauses aren't actually compliant. Just a couple more things that continue to be issues is one about copyright. And due to a continued, perhaps not full understanding among the legal community as to what BIM data consists of, you may want to check that your contracts cover, as regards copyright, not just the models and the design, but the electronic data that's produced from the models, as well as the objects within the models. And when you think about objects, if you only have a license from the manufacturer to put the objects in your models, make sure you aren't saying you are giving all copyright to the client, because you're obviously in breach of contract, because you can't give away something you don't have in the first place. And that's just something to talk to your professional advisors about so they can draft it accordingly. Just one of the last things is about the scope of roles and duties. When BIM first came about, we saw a whole deluge of new terms: BIM lead and BIM information manager, and BIM project manager, BIM manager. And none of these things still have any special meaning. It's whatever you want it to mean. Whilst we have a general idea what a BIM coordinator usually does, what a BIM information manager usually does, the precise detail of that will differ from project to project. And if you are being appointed on one of these roles, or you're appointing someone, do put a scope in, because otherwise, if you want them to do clash detection, how far do they have to do it? How often? Do you want them to deal with all the different parties, make sure that they are complying with their BIM obligations? What does that actually look like? Does that mean they're having meetings? Do they have the right authority to tell people what to do? It's the devil's in the detail, and you'll find that most of the time the disputes you have are not about the very clear contract terms you put in, but it's the gaps, the silences, the bits of ambiguity that you then have an argument about. And on the point of roles and duties, insurers appreciate the benefits of BIM. However, as with all things, don't forget to keep your brokers updated. Don't just assume BIM's been around for a long while, I don't have to mention it to my brokers. It doesn't hurt to discuss it with them and say, I'm taking on this particular BIM specific role. Is it covered by my insurance? Do I need more cyber risk cover? Do I have particular cover for if all the data gets lost? Just as particularly as your BIM obligations probably expand as BIM becomes business as usual. And just finally, as I mentioned, do drop us an email at BIM for Legal and we'll add you to the mailing list. We are also on Twitter and we try and have regular events. If you have any questions as well, do drop me an email. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, May. That was really, really informative and useful. My main takeaway for that was no blanket statements. BIM according to 19650 doesn't mean anything. And, define, figure out what you're doing and why, and scope accordingly on your projects. Brilliant. Okay, well, if anybody has any questions for May, if you can add them to the chat, then we'll put them to her and the rest of the panel at the end of the presentations. But in the meantime, what I will do is pass on to Chloe Obi, who is our next presenter. Hi, Chloe, are you there?
Yes. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. We can't see you. We have no.
Okay. I'll just share. Hi, good morning, everyone. So my name is Chloe Obi and I am the head of BIM at WIB UK. I come from an architectural background, so fully qualified architect, and I've been working within the construction industry for the last 15 years. So I'll just share my screen. I'll actually turn off my camera and then just share my screen. So can you see my
we can see the
presentation?
PowerPoint
Okay.
screen now. Yeah.
Okay, good, great stuff. Yes.
Great.
So yeah, just giving my introduction. Okay, brilliant. Just bear with me 1 second. So great. So today's presentation will take the following structure. We'll begin by looking at so BRIG UK, who are we and where are we today? And before going on to look at a case study, which will focus on implementation documents, classifications, level of information need, information management, and I'll touch upon virtual reality and augmented reality, what we're doing on our projects. So BRIG is a global business which has over 129,000 employees located over 93 countries. Its organisational structure spans across 5 main sectors. These are split as follows into telecoms, television, construction, roads, property, and even energy and transport. Within the UK, we have a number of projects, some of which are located even in London, Manchester, Birmingham, and Bristol, just to name a few. So we have quite a global presence within the UK itself. So where are we today? So where are we today in terms of our BIM implementation strategy? So it's probably worth noting that we started on our BIM journey back in 2012. However, for us, the 3 key ingredients to note when it comes to BIM and digital construction within BRIG are that concerning technology, people, processes, and this will be discussed further as I progress throughout today's presentation. There are 3 key. We have, so our key areas of focus are around strategy, implementation, and deployment. With regards to our strategy, we are committed to working with our clients to understand their specific project requirements and needs, providing a culture of collaboration amongst project teams within BIM UK, engaging with and supporting our supply chain. So today's webinar, it will touch upon this in a bit more detail. So just to identify what mechanisms we have in place to ensure that our supply chain are on board in our digital journey, and obviously the migration from the PAS to the ISO, and also providing a culture, so a continuous awareness of training, awareness and training for UK employees as well. So bullet point 4 of our BIM policy discusses the ability to provide continuous training and awareness for our employees. This is achieved by implementing our in-house training matrix, which is also referred to as our training academy, as well as via internal BIM and digital construction circulars. So within this slide, this is one that has actually been shared with our BRIG colleagues internally, and the main focus there is the migration from the PAS to the ISO 19650, which I led on behalf of the company. So as I'm sure everyone on the call is aware, so to aid the adoption of BIM within the UK, so the UK government produced a number of industry standard documents. Initially, a set of British standards and PAS documents were produced and issued to industry. However, these have subsequently been replaced by the ISO suite. And here in this diagram, you can see where we are in terms of the replacement of the PAS documentations to the ISO. It's probably worth noting that with the migration from, say, the PAS to the ISO, or the transition from PAS to ISO, there are a number of key terminology changes. And here within this slide, I've just tried to capture that just to give you a summary. And so the information on the left-hand side denotes the new terminology as prescribed in the ISO 19650 series. The key ones to note is, rather than referring to, so previously we would refer to the EIRs as being the employer information requirements. However, now with the transition to the ISO, this is now referred to as the exchange information requirements. Another key update to note is previously we had discussed and talked about level of detail and level of information. However, now the new terminology relates to or captures the level of information need. And that's really important because when we're actually working on our project within the UK, it's really prudent to identify who needs to provide what and when. So through the level of information need document, we're able to set out a clear strategy for that. And obviously that's then shared with the consultants that we work with on our projects. So what was the trigger to move to the international standard? So I'm sure everyone is aware, but essentially it was to encourage greater adoption of BIM globally, improve sector productivity, deliver benefits across the supply chain, and so on and so forth. So quite often I'm asked, okay, so how can BIM and digital construction be mapped as a process? And within this diagram that I created a while ago, I have attempted to do so. So right at the top, we have the new RIBA plan of work stages. And in the middle of the slide, we have the various aspects of BIM that we within WIB UK with our supply chain are able to deliver on our projects. In terms of the protocols, one thing to note and one thing that is extremely important for us is that, quite often we're asked, okay, so how does the EIR then relate to the other BIM management documents? So it's probably worth noting that, so right at the top of the diagram here, we have what is known as the organisational information requirements, and this describes the information required for asset management systems and other functional organisational functions. So essentially, this is the business case identifying project risks, budget, so on and so forth. It's also worth noting that within WIB, we haven't necessarily had sight of a vast number of any OIRs, but it's just something just to note within the UK industry. In addition to having the OIR, we also receive asset information requirements from our consultants, and we will also receive the exchange information requirements, so EIR. And then within UK, we will then respond to the exchange information requirements by producing either a pre or post appointment BIM execution plan. So the next couple of slides, I'll just talk about a case study. And so the project in question, I won't actually mention the name of it, but I'll just give you a bit of background. So the project itself is £115 million mixed-use development located in the centre of a new leisure quarter in the historic city southeast of London. And the development has a new public square at its heart and overlooks the river which runs through the city centre. The development consists of the following: so 50,000 square feet of commercial space, 5-screen cinema, 190 new homes, 490 student accommodations, cast bars and restaurants. So it's quite a large scheme in itself. So for the project, the information production and procedures document was produced for the project itself. So this is a supporting document to the BEP, and it describes in detail and step-by-step how information will be managed on the project and touches upon items such as naming conventions, so be it object or model naming conventions, clash detection processes, coordination, builders works, model preparation for exchange, so on and so forth. It's also worth noting that with regards to all of these documents, when we're starting a project, we issue all of these documents to the design team and ensure that they are also referenced into the contracts that the designers are signing up to. In addition to the previous slide, we have also produced a post-appointment BIM execution plan, and this document focused primarily on project BIM strategies, collaborative BIM working, and any issues surrounding interoperability. The BEP also covered agreeing upon the project goals and objectives, coordinate systems, and processes for coordinate systems, naming conventions, level of information need, processes for model audit, and clash detection processes. Again, it's very critical to ensure that these documents are shared with the design team members as early on as possible, and to ensure that they are actually referenced within the scope of services or the contracts. It's also vital to stipulate from the beginning what type of classification systems will be used for the project. So for us within WIB UK, this is extremely important, as the classification systems are used to inform our 4D phase scan sequencing, 5D cost, and Code B related exercises. So on the project, so at stage 4 of the project, both systems and products were utilised, and here is just an example of that. So taking it back to the ISO 19650 suite of documents, we have produced a project risk register, which so basically we've incorporated a BIM specific risk section to our standard project risk register, and this is to be completed at the early stages of the project, and shared shared internally with members of our internal teams, so that we and the design managers and project managers internally, as well as the consultants, know what BIM related issues that they need to be aware of for the project. In addition to the project risk register, we would also complete a mobilisation plan, which covers key items such as testing and documenting the proposed information production methods and procedures, as well as testing information exchanges between the task teams. So in terms of, say, model federation, where we are within WIB UK, and again, this is all clearly identified and referenced to within scope of services and the contracts that our consultants essentially sign up to. So establishing a strategy for the information flow and model coordination is critical for us. So the models are shared more easily and frequently within a particular platform. In this case, it's BIM 360, a cloud-based application which enables the design team to access information more easily. In addition to this, a dedicated platform was used to efficiently manage the comments and review activities associated with the model, so review any clashes and issues associated with it. So we use a dedicated platform which enables us to comment on and raise issues directly on either the 2D information as well as the 3D information. And it all goes towards the transfer of information and ensuring that we are able to receive the correct metadata, the correct data that we require at the project at key milestones. In addition to this, we have established a builders works process. So the models were also used to inform 3D builders work processes and activities, an activity that required buy-in from the design team at the early stages of the project. So generally speaking, the MEP engineers, they would model the holes, and within this model, they will then issue some schedules to manage the holes and to look at the approval of the holes. That model containing the holes and the schedules are then issued to the other members of the design team, the architects, structural engineers, and to us as well. And we then look at the overall coordination of the holes for the project. And it's also worth noting that this process is then referenced within all of the BIM management, so all of our ISO suite documentation, as well as within our revised contracts. In terms of the phase scan sequencing, so what we tend to do is, and for the project, we utilise the models in conjunction with the construction program to then produce phase scan sequencing animations such as this. One of the key items that I mentioned previously is that concerning naming conventions. So for us, it's really vital and critical that the consultants implement either the unit class classification systems, because that has a bearing on the 4D phase scan sequencing activities that our internal teams need to implement thereafter. In terms of the 5D, again, so 5D cost exercises for this particular project, models were used to extract the quantities to inform our internal quantity takeoff exercises. And this was undertaken using our group specific templates that have been developed in-house. However, we're also developing an AI-related platform, which also enables us to look at intelligent 5D activities. In addition to this, I just wanted to bring this to your attention. All of these items are referenced in some way, shape or form within the contracts, so that the consultants essentially know what they will be signing up to when actually implementing BIM on our projects. But we have a whole host of BIM to field activities that are implemented on our projects. And the last couple of slides, I'll just be talking about what we do in terms of virtual reality. So for the project, so VR offers users another means to view and interrogate the models produced. The relevant models are exported out either as an FBX file format, taken into, say, whether it's 3D Studio Max, before being imported directly into the VR engine Unity. The VR goggles give a stereo immersive experience, and the VR, so virtual reality goggles, allow the clients to walk around the buildings and to see every angle simply by turning their heads. Originally designed for games, they have been developed to interpret BIM files in a stunning, realistic and natural way. This has been implemented on a number of our projects, and again, this is just another use case of us being able to implement BIM in alignment or in conjunction with the ISO on our projects. And I'd like to end the presentation there.
Great, thank you so much, Chloe. That was really interesting, and it's good to see some case studies and real life examples of BIM in action. Thank you for that. I'll move on. Thank you very much. I'll move on now and pass over to Rob, who is our final panelist today. And please remember, keep popping your questions in the chat panel or in the questions panel, and we'll get to those after Rob's finished. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you. So I'll keep this fairly short and sweet. It's kind of just a quick presentation really on my perspective on BIM in the UK, but I think probably I'll start with saying that in the UK we're very much moving away from BIM, and we're actually moving towards a more mature approach to what BIM has tried to achieve, which is very much around information management. Hopefully you can see my slides. It seems to have paused for some reason, but did that jump, Vicky?
We
to
can.
The next slide?
No, we can see your presentation screen, but not your slide screen.
How do you unpause that? Let me just play it again. That's really weird. I've never seen it do that before. It's now saying it's paused. Let me try and share my whole screen. And then,
there we go.
Let's do that. Yeah. You got to see it now. Yeah. So just very, very briefly, Bond Bryan is an architectural practice first and foremost, but Bond Bryan Digital is a brand of Bond Bryan offering information management services, and we have other brands within the business. So my perspective is very much looking at this from an information management kind of activity. What I will say is that there are challenges currently within delivering BIM in the UK, and information management is still, as was pointed out by May earlier, there's still lots of references to BIM level 2, and what we should know is that these are new projects as well. I'm not just talking about projects that have been around for a long time, but that terminology was replaced in October 2019, so it's been replaced by the UK BIM framework. So we're still kind of lagging behind in terms of developing requirements. We're seeing information requirements that are very generic, very just rebadged by replacing find and select and replacing the PAS and the BS references in their documents. Very outdated terminology. Things like data drops are still being used. Non-UK processes like US level of detail. And then with the actual exchange information requirements, and I think it's important to understand that we changed from employers' information requirements to exchange information requirements. That was really to promote the fact that we need to understand what we need to exchange. And actually, if you go through most exchange information requirements, they don't actually contain any information requirements. There's very little focus as well on the documentation part. It's all still very model or very COBie focused and very data focused, and that's not what we're trying to deliver with the ISO. We're trying to move away from the models being the sole delivery of information. You're also seeing many projects information standards, projects information production methods, procedures. These are client resources. They're often not prepared by clients and not available within their documents, and you're seeing contractors writing these within their BEP. It's not as under the ISO. That's not how the ISO is designed to work, and we need to move away from that approach, and we need to make clients more educated in that regard. We're seeing information management demand grow massively, but what we're seeing is that the skills and expertise isn't necessarily out there. So unless we're looking for somebody at the moment, but we're seeing others looking, and it's not a massive wealth of talent out there. And the question is, how can we keep up with the pace of demand if we don't have the skills to deliver the information we need? We're also obviously seeing technology challenges in connecting tools efficiently and effectively together, and I'll touch on that again in a second. We're still seeing a lack of information management included, particularly in frameworks, but projects as well. Seeing many of my architectural project colleagues with projects that still have no requirement for any kind of information management. We're still seeing common data environments that are often poorly set up and managed. And I think, we should just got to remember that's almost like what was a BIM level 1 sort of task. So in some places we haven't moved beyond Go yet. We're still seeing a lot of rubbish going into models. And ultimately, when we get to the end of the process, we're also seeing a lot of support for COBie within CAFM systems. And I've also seen many CAFM systems wanting to charge clients additional costs for that. I think what we're then ending up with at the end of the project is much of what is being created, and there's lots of nice stuff and fancy stuff. We're ending up with it in a digital bin, and I pinched this image as a digital bin. I think this is probably a more intelligent digital bin than I'm kind of talking about, but a lot of this stuff is really not being used, and there's other people out there who will tell you that even the data that's been collected during the design and construction process is often recreated after handover, which is not really what we're trying to do. But I wanted to start with the challenges. I won't call them negatives. There's lots of positives as well. In the UK, we have the UK BIM framework, and ultimately the development of the associated guidance, which is free and available to both anyone in the UK, but also globally. And I think seeing other people globally looking at what we're doing in the UK, we're starting to see information requirements improve. We're starting to see slowly that they are becoming client specific, and we're definitely seeing an uptake of ISO 19650. Some certainly to do with government, to do with the construction playbook, and some, a lot of them are starting to align to current standards and best practice, but they are few and far between, but they're starting to move in that direction. I think from our point of view, the exchange information requirements, we're trying to focus on all information that needs to be exchanged. So we're talking documentation, graphical and alphanumerical information, and how we can improve that process. And we're starting to see technology support the use of what I will call intelligent EIRs, moving away from Word, moving away from Excel as a way of defining our information requirements. And on the right hand side is an image of what we call our information hub, which is a technology solution to support what would have traditionally been called documentation, now under the ISO is called resources. So again, we're trying to promote the use of information management on frameworks and make sure that that's central to approach. And we've recently helped the Department for Education develop their new suite of resources for their upcoming framework. We're starting to see the need to set up common data environment compliant approaches, particularly with the ISO. And then just touching on a couple of other things, we are trying to help clients promote and use COBie over sort of bespoke data requirements. But ultimately, we are trying to be quite hard on clients as well. And we're trying to ask, what do you really need in this process, so that we actually get a clear and concise deliverable, which is what May was talking about, rather than just, can we have ISO 19650? So just to sort of finish off, I just kept this very short. What's next? I'm currently working on development of information management scopes of service. I think we're lacking that. If you look back, we've got the CIC scope for information management services, which was a generic scope and really isn't kind of a line item priceable kind of document, and we're working on that to publish that hopefully in September. We're also working on a digital version of the UK BIM framework guidance, which is due to go live next week. So, that's not really been publicised yet, but that is something that we've been looking to practice what we preach, even in the guidance, that we can have searchable guidance, not just old school PDFs, although the PDFs will still be available. We are starting to see governments take their EIRs and put them in the public domain, and I think that quality will start to filter down in much the same way it did in 2016 when we had government departments putting those EIRs out there. We are starting to see more, or we'll see more alignment between the National Annex and Uniclass, which I know some people have sort of commented on. And then my colleague Emma is involved in the Government and Industry Interoperability Group, or GIG for short, and that's looking at Open BIM and how we can drive, particularly from a client's perspective, how Open BIM can be more integrated. And I think, you look back historically, I know, I've always been a champion of Open BIM, but we're really starting to see this taken seriously now, and not just kind of a need to have, or sorry, a nice to have, it's now become a need to have. And we're also seeing the emergence of the information management framework. And just finally, just to sort of last item really, the EIRs that we're trying to create, I think what we're now seeing is what these kind of using technology solutions, we're creating these machine readable EIRs that ultimately now can be linked directly to rule-based checking and can make sure that clients can actually deliver, or the delivery teams can deliver what the client wanted, and therefore we've got more proof in that regard, and clients can take a more serious approach to it. And finally, a lot of what we're trying to do as a sort of an organisation is use what we're calling circular thinking, taking all that knowledge from projects, each project that we do, and all stages really, and putting that back into the next project. So every project builds on the last one. I'll finish there so that we can go on to the panel discussion. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you, Rob. If you can hang around for us here, and I've noticed your branded hoodie, that's very cool, I like it. I'm sure that's available to all of our listeners and watchers if you want it, right? They just drop you an email.
Yeah, for a small price, yeah.
If we could invite Chloe and May back to turn their cameras on for us. Excellent. Hello, ladies, great. So I definitely want to finish at 12:30, so we'll just get a couple of questions in. We've had some good ones come from our watchers and listeners today. And the first one actually was for May. The BIM protocol or contract is the document that I am least familiar with, so this is UK. Where is a good place to start to get information on what a successful one looks like? And are there any samples of best practice or toolkits for developing the essential criteria required for this document?
Well, the information protocol is designed for people who probably have never seen BIM before. So there's essentially a checklist of documents at the front page, and you fill those in. Where's your BET? Where's your EIR? And it's designed that you can just include it. There's guidance about it on the UK BIM Framework website. Again, we try to make it very, very jargon-free, legalese free. There's also video, there's 2 videos actually about it on the UK BIM Alliance website. So we talked about what the content is, and then we did one recently about an update. But if anyone ever has any questions on once they read it and bits of it don't seem to make sense, do just drop me or the BIM for Legal an email and we'll help.
Fantastic. Rob, Chloe, would any of you have anything to add to that?
Only on the information protocol, I've certainly seen we've had to go through some quite difficult discussions with legal teams to try and get this onto projects. The one thing that they don't seem to like is the idea that documentation, or I should call it resources, are updated during the project. So the project information standard, the project's information production methods and procedures, and they want this kind of static set of documents that go into contract. And it's an interesting question, maybe from back for May ultimately, is how we can deal with that. Is that we are changing these documents, and obviously you need a change control process if you're going to go through that. And I think that's something that certainly the government departments have seen it is a challenge on how we get these into contract, seriously get them into contract, not just sort of dump them in the back of documents and forget about them, how they really tie to contract. So I think that's something that we kind of need to work on going forwards.
And it's education to the lawyers. I think lawyers don't like uncertainty, and in the early days when the BET obviously is a living document, and it took lawyers a long time to get their head around that, and they said, well, just don't include it in the contract, that makes it easy. But it is, you do need to kind of cater for that in the contractual clause. It's perfectly possible to do. it's just almost explaining to them it is never going to be static. It's just by the nature of it.
Indeed.
But it is an uphill struggle.
Yeah, it's probably worth noting. So from the WIB UK sides of things, we would reference in these documents into the contracts and add, reference in the actual the revision number, if you like. But obviously, it's heavily caveated in the sense that those documents are subject to change. And once we have the various coordination review meetings with the consultants, those documents will be updated and will need to be tracked accordingly. So it's something that we are actively doing on our projects and trying to identify or streamlining the process to enable us to capture that. So whether it's via VOs or something along those lines. So it'll be interesting to know from yourself, May, how our other contractors and individuals within the industry are actually tackling that issue.
I think generally in the industry, it is very much tied to the change process. So you have your change process in your contract for any changes in your contract variations. And it's the easiest way is just to say, if this document changes, we compare it against your change control process. And is it a variation or did we change a word and it makes a difference to your scope?
Sure.
And you just, it's not, I think people get very overexcited when you add the word BIM or digital rather than just saying we're just doing some stuff using a computer. Let's just talk about it as if we weren't using a computer. We're not sort of, I think people almost try and overcomplicate that process and just tie it back to what you do anyway.
Yeah, it's all captured within our change control process within WIB.
I guess it's an interesting conversation. I mean, there must be case studies from other industries. We're not the first industry to have to deal with documents that are continuously changing, or not documents, that's the wrong word, with requirements and processes that are changing. And I guess it's that question of what's a change versus what's a revision, if you know what I mean as well. For instance, the BIM execution plan, you might add or amend the code for a level, or you might make a minor revision to the document. It's not necessarily a change, and it's just identifying as well what constitutes a change, because otherwise you'll find yourself all sat in a room, legal teams and managers every time you add a new supplier to your contact list execution plan.
Agree it at the beginning. Work out what, insofar as you can, what sort of changes will amount to variation and what is just and effectively an administrative change.
Mm-hmm. I guess the theme I got from all of the presentations and from this conversation as well is we have to be reasonable human beings with this. We have to talk to each other, and it's a conversation rather than it being the black and white contractual environment that I think we've been comfortable in construction for a long time. I wrote this at the beginning, therefore that's the be all and end all, and anything else is your problem then. Like we have to keep talking to each other. Okay, we've got another question that I want to get through, and what I might do is we've got a couple of queries and comments coming through. I might send them to our panelists after this and ask maybe for written responses as well, and we can share that as a blog post. But the question that I think is really interesting is from Saida, who asks, hi May again, in your experience, what party is typically the ones not fully grasping BIM legal when disputes come up? Is it the appointing party, the lead appointed party, or the appointed party? So who's not getting it the most?
Probably the appointing party, and I don't know if Rob and Chloe have this experience as well. I think clients, through no fault of their own, there isn't that much guidance for clients, and they aren't the actual ones doing it. So they say, well, I've read about this thing that's called BIM and it's supposed to save me some money, so can you just go and do it? And they ask their lawyers, well, what should I put in the contract? I don't know. I'm going to ask the technical team, who then cut and paste something in. And there's this sort of circular problem, I think, which we need to maybe as an industry help resolve, just get more guidance. But on the other end, these smaller subconsultants, subcontractors still say, well, BIM isn't really for me and the sort of thing I do. And maybe it's sort of from bottom up. There also has to be an education on, they don't have to do all the BIM. It's just maybe certain aspects are relevant to them.
I mean, I would certainly add that, you know, clients need a lot of support through this process. The ISO places more onus on the client, the appointing party, to, you know, to be at the heart of this. And they even, you know, some organisations will be doing that internally, but others will need a third party to support them. And, you know, that's something we try and do with clients, and we're trying to work through with that. The people who are obviously coming back and saying there's an issue are the people delivering it, typically the contractor, sometimes designers, saying, you know, this is ambiguous, or I don't know what to deliver and I don't want to sign up to it, or, you know, it's too onerous. They're the ones raising the issues, and obviously the clients are then in the firing line of, you know, resolving those. So they do need support, and I think the big question is how we can educate more clients, not just I mean, private clients will probably do it themselves, but, you know, government clients, being strong government clients, you know, going back to, again, what do they want? What do they want to receive? And, you know, we deal with lots of clients who only build once, so they're not necessarily experienced in knowing what to ask for, how to deal with this, you know, and they need that expertise in the same way they go to a project manager or, you know, cost management, you know, to support projects. And so information management is a, you know, I wouldn't say it's a profession, but it's certainly a growing requirement on projects. And obviously with things like the construction playbook and the golden thread and all the things that came out of Grenfell, you know, the client is in the position where they've got to manage their information, and they've got to you know, be much more realizing that it is an asset in as much as the way the physical asset is. So it comes to the client really to get themselves up to speed, or ask for help to get themselves up to speed.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yes.
I mean, Chloe, would you have a closing comment on that one?
Yes, certainly. I mean, from my perspective, yeah, so we have quite often some, you know, informed clients and some clients who are more the, you know, novice clients, and it's really the latter who will then buy in the, you know, by a third-party organisation, the BIM type expertise or information management type expertise to then enable them to actually produce their EIRs, asset information requirements, and so forth. But, you know, in terms of the new ISO documentations and the new suites of documents, the onus is very, you know, vastly on the clients, and it's really down to the clients to advise us and to tell us what they want, or what information they require from us. We have various mechanisms and processes internally whereby we can, you know, help our clients on that journey if they perhaps do not necessarily have the internal expertise. So we have mechanisms to do that. But it's very much about, you know, training and awareness on the client side, but then also what we're finding on our projects is training and awareness on the specialist subcontractors. So further down the work stream, so when we're actually working on the project, say at RIBA stage 4 or 4 and 5, and just ensuring that the specialist subcontractors are, you know, fully aware as to what it is we require from them in terms of the information management side of things, and B, just to ensure that they are aware of how to actually deliver that. So whether it's through new tools or a mechanism, we can then work with them to ensure that we get the information and the data that we then require to meet the project requirements.
Great, excellent. Okay, well, I am regretfully going to have to stop the conversation there. I feel like we could talk for another half hour really easily, but I am mindful that you guys have got very busy lives and busy jobs, and our audience as well have to go and deliver projects. So what we'll do is I will send the rest of the questions through to our panelists. They will respond in written fashion. And the recording of this webinar will be available on the Women in BIM website. In the meantime, if you want to get in touch with us or any of our panelists, do so at info@womeninbim.org. There's our Twitter page, Women in BIM, LinkedIn, Women in BIM, and you can at vicky@womeninbim.org. There's a theme there, you see. So from there, I once again say thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you to our panelists. It's been wonderful, and I look forward to talking to you all again very soon. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Spain.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.